2 days before Easter, my mother looked around the dining room like a general assigning troops. "Your brother's in-laws are coming," she said with a satisfied smile. "About 30 people." My brother Mark barely looked up from his phone. His wife Emily was already talking about where everyone would sit. Then Mom turned to me. "So you'll need to buy the groceries today. The ham, the vegetables, desserts, everything. Tomorrow you can start baking. Easter morning you'll cook, keep the buffet full, clean as you go, and make sure everyone has coffee." She said it so casually that it sounded less like a request and more like reading a schedule she'd already printed. I waited for someone to laugh. No one did. "I already have plans this weekend," I said carefully. Mom waved a hand as if brushing away dust. "You can cancel them. You're the only reliable one in this family." Mark finally chimed in. "Come on, Hannah, you always handle the kitchen. You're the best at it." Not one person asked if I wanted to spend Easter with the family. They only talked about how I'd serve them. For the first time in years. I smiled. "Sure," I said quietly. Mom smiled back, completely satisfied. She thought she'd already won. She had no idea that before sunrise the next morning, I'd be driving away with a packed suitcase, and by the time 30 guests walked into her house on Easter morning, there wouldn't be a holiday meal waiting for anyone. There wouldn't even be a kitchen ready to cook one. The biggest surprise wasn't that I left. It was why. For as long as I could remember, Easter in our family followed the same script. Mom planned the guest list. Mark accepted compliments before anyone even arrived. Emily decorated the dining room just enough for photos. And I disappeared into the kitchen. Nobody called me the host. Nobody thanked me for making the holiday happen. I was simply expected to do it because that was my role. That afternoon, while Mom and Emily debated centerpiece colors and seating charts, they talked about me as though I wasn't even standing there. "Hannah will handle the cooking," Emily said. Mom nodded, she always does. "I'll need extra folding tables," Mark added. "Can you pick those up too, Hannah?" No one asked whether I had time. No one asked whether I could afford feeding 30 people. They simply kept adding to my list. When I hesitated, Mom looked at me with the same expression she'd worn for years. "Don't make this difficult." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because for the first time, I realized none of them had noticed I'd stopped arguing. That night, after everyone went to bed, I quietly packed a small suitcase. Then I opened the refrigerator. Everything I'd bought over the past 2 weeks. The expensive ham, fresh vegetables, butter, eggs, cream, specialty cheeses, baking supplies, I packed into coolers. Next came the pantry. The flour, the sugar, the spices, the serving trays I'd purchased. Every item I'd paid for with my own money. I wasn't taking theirs. I was taking mine. Finally, I opened my phone and cancelled the grocery delivery scheduled for Saturday afternoon. The confirmation email appeared seconds later. Cancelled. Before dawn, I loaded everything into my car and pulled away without making a sound. An hour later, the city disappeared behind me as I headed toward a lakeside resort where 2 close friends had convinced me to spend the weekend weeks earlier. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. The Collins family group chat. Mom had sent only one message. "Don't be late tomorrow, everyone's counting on you." I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking my phone and placing it face down on the passenger seat. For the first time in years, I decided I wasn't going back. But I couldn't stop wondering what would happen when 30 hungry guests walked through that front door and discovered exactly what was waiting for them. Or rather, what wasn't. The voicemail notification appeared before I'd even finished checking into the resort. I ignored it. Another came a few minutes later. Then another. I slipped my phone into my bag and stepped onto the balcony overlooking the quiet lake. The breeze carried the scent of pine instead of roasting ham, and for the first time in years, Easter weekend didn't begin with a grocery list taped to my refrigerator. It felt unfamiliar. It also felt right. As I unpacked, memories kept finding their way back. Last Easter, I'd been awake before 5 in the morning, basting a turkey-sized ham while casseroles baked in both ovens. By the time the last guests finally sat down, I'd been on my feet for nearly 9 hours. When I finally carried my own plate to the table, every chair was occupied. "Oh," Mom had said without looking up, "just eat in the kitchen, someone might need this seat." So I had. 20 minutes later, I was eating cold potatoes beside a sink full of dirty dishes when Mom walked in. "The potatoes are a little dry," she said. "Next year use more butter." "Not thank you. Not you worked hard. Just criticism." A few minutes after that, Mark leaned through the doorway with a grin. "There you are," he laughed. "We were starting to think you actually joined the party. Honestly, Hannah, you belong in the kitchen anyway." Everyone in the dining room laughed with him, including Mom. That wasn't even the worst part. Over the years, she'd constantly ask me to grab a few groceries, because she'd pay me back after the holiday. She never did. Each receipt had seemed too small to argue about. $50 here, $100 there, decorations, baking pans, serving platters. By the time I finally added everything together, I'd quietly spent thousands of dollars making holidays everyone else claimed Mom hosted. Sitting on the balcony, I opened my phone. 12 missed calls. 7 text messages. 3 voicemails. Without reading a single one, I switched the device to Do Not Disturb. This time, if the holiday fell apart, I wasn't going to rush back and save it. A few minutes later, curiosity got the better of me. I played the newest voicemail. Mom's voice was tight, nothing like her usual confident tone. "Hannah, where exactly are the Easter groceries?" Easter morning arrived with another flood of missed calls. I left the phone on the nightstand and headed out for breakfast with my friends. For once, I wasn't checking oven temperatures or wondering if I'd bought enough dinner rolls. I was simply enjoying a quiet meal. Back at my parents' house, things were unfolding very differently. The first cars carrying Mark's in-laws pulled into the driveway just after 9. Mom greeted everyone with her usual confident smile. "Come in, we're almost ready." She walked into the kitchen expecting trays of food waiting to be cooked. Instead, she froze. The refrigerator held little more than a carton of milk and a few leftovers. The pantry shelves looked strangely bare. There were no pies cooling on the counter. No vegetables washed and prepped. No ham. No baking ingredients. Nothing that could feed 30 people. "Mark," she shouted. He hurried in, looked around and frowned. "What happened?" "I don't know," Mom snapped. "Where's Hannah?" As more guests filtered inside, the tension spread through the house. Emily opened cabinet after cabinet. "There has to be something." "There isn't," Mark muttered. Someone suggested ordering groceries, so Mom grabbed her laptop and tried to confirm the Easter delivery. Instead, she found a cancellation notice. Confused, she searched through the order history. Every receipt. Every catering deposit. Every specialty bakery order. Every grocery purchase. Each one had been paid through Hannah's account. None of them had been placed under Diane's name. The room grew noticeably quieter. Near the dining room doorway, Mark's mother-in-law exchanged a puzzled glance with another relative. "I thought Diane hosted Easter every year," she said softly. An older uncle looked from the empty kitchen to Mom. "So if Hannah didn't come?" He hesitated before asking the question no one else wanted to voice. "Are you saying she paid for all of this every single year?" The silence that followed was louder than any argument. The Easter celebration never really began. Instead of conversations about food and family, every room in the house filled with uncomfortable whispers. Guests who had expected a warm holiday meal now stood holding paper cups of coffee while watching my mother and brother argue in the kitchen. "This doesn't make any sense," Mark said, pulling open another empty cabinet. She couldn't have taken everything. Mom folded her arms. She must have done this to embarrass us. One of Emily's relatives quietly replied, or maybe she just stopped doing everything for you. Nobody answered. The comment lingered in the room. Trying to prove Hannah had overreacted, Mark marched into the Home Office and opened the family computer. If she ordered everything online, the confirmations have to be here. He searched through old emails. Within seconds, his confidence began to fade. Mom, she walked over impatiently. What? Look at this. The first receipt showed Easter groceries from the previous year. Paid by Hannah. The next email was for Thanksgiving decorations. Paid by Hannah. Christmas serving trays. Paid by Hannah. Rental tables. Baking supplies. Disposable plates. Fresh flowers. Holiday catering deposits. Every holiday stretched back through years of receipts, all carrying the same name on the payment confirmation. Hannah Collins. Emily slowly covered her mouth. I thought your mom paid for these. So did I, another relative admitted. Mark kept scrolling. The numbers climbed higher and higher. Hundreds became thousands. No reimbursements. No transfers back to Hannah. Nothing. Across the room, Diane struggled to keep control. I never asked her to spend that much. A quiet voice answered from the dining table. But you kept accepting it. Heads turned. It was Mark's mother-in-law. She looked directly at Diane. If Hannah paid for the food, cooked it, cleaned afterward, and still wasn't sitting here today. She paused. What exactly was she getting out of these holidays? Nobody had an answer. At that exact moment, every phone on the family group chat chimed. My message had finally arrived. I didn't ruin Easter. I simply stopped pretending your holiday was my responsibility. The room fell silent once again. Before my mother could type a response, one of my older cousins slowly stood from his chair. He looked around the room before saying the words everyone had been avoiding. I think everyone deserves to hear the whole story. I returned home late Monday afternoon. The driveway was empty except for my mother's car. The decorations were already gone. No music. No laughter. Just silence. I carried my overnight bag to the front door and let myself inside. Mom and Mark were waiting in the living room. Neither of them looked angry anymore. They looked exhausted. Mom spoke first. How could you do this to us? I set my bag down. No, I replied calmly. The better question is, how long were you planning to keep doing this to me? Neither of them answered. Instead, I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. I've been saving these. Mark opened it. Inside were years of grocery receipts, holiday shopping lists, cancelled checks, online order confirmations, and credit card statements. Every document carried my name. Every payment had come from my account. I never agreed to host 30 people, I said. You volunteered me. I looked at my mother. You told everyone you were hosting Easter. Then I looked at Mark. You accepted compliments for holidays you never helped create. I didn't destroy anything, I continued. I took the groceries, supplies, and serving pieces that belonged to me because I paid for them. I cancelled deliveries that were being charged to my account. I stopped providing free labor and free funding. The room stayed quiet. Finally, Emily spoke. I honestly thought your mom handled everything. I thought that too, Mark admitted, staring at the receipts. I never even looked. Mom tried one last defense. You've always been better at cooking. Being good at something doesn't make it my obligation, I answered. I'm your daughter, not your unpaid staff. For the first time in my life, my mother had nothing to say. Word about Easter spread through both sides of the family within days. The story everyone heard wasn't that I had abandoned Easter. It was that one daughter had quietly financed and worked every major holiday, while everyone else accepted the credit. Several relatives called to apologize. One aunt admitted, "I always thought your mother was doing all the work, I had no idea." Even Mark called a week later. "I should have helped years ago," he said. "I'm sorry." The following Easter looked nothing like the last. Mark hosted at his own house. Every family contributed a dish. Expenses were divided before anyone went shopping. People actually asked who was available instead of assigning the work to one person. My mother no longer controlled every detail because no one allowed one person to carry the entire holiday anymore. As for me, I arrived with a single homemade dessert. I sat down when everyone else did. I finished my meal while it was still hot. And when dinner ended, someone else stood up and started washing dishes. No one asked me to. No one expected me to. For the first time, I wasn't valued for what I could do in the kitchen. I was valued simply because I was family. As I looked around the table, I realized the emptiest kitchen my family had ever faced wasn't an act of revenge. It was the first honest reflection of everything I'd been carrying alone.